Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy. Hey, Bruce.
Hey, David, how are you doing today?
Good, Bruce. I've been limping around since Sunday night. I hurt my knee in a shinny game by colliding with my wife,
Oh, gee.
who was on my team.
hmm
So we were both going for the puck, and I smashed into her. Fortunately, she wasn't hurt.
That was my first question.
Yeah, she was okay.
Second one is, how are you doing with your knee?
I was limping around pretty good, but my knee's getting better, so that's a huge relief. I mean, we played non-contact hockey, but any hockey,
In theory.
you always get banged up. You always get hurt, especially as you get a little older. It's just
Mhm.
nonstop, but it's fun, so it's highly addictive. How are things with you?
Oh, pretty good, all things considered. Things considered, it's, Stanley Cup Finals time. It's my 59th straight Stanley Cup Finals. Would be 60 if the league hadn't canceled an entire season on me along the way there, but it's it's always an interesting time of year, and it's we still got sort of the lingering after tingle of the Oilers having gone as deep into proceedings as they did. And now we got, I think, very good news on the coaching front. So I'm kind of in an upbeat position as of this moment
Yeah.
about my Oilers.
So Bruce, I'm sure your first Stanley Cup wasn't Foster Hewitt on the radio, right? It was televised, was it not? Or
It was televised. It was 1963. And at that time, they used to join the games in progress, but in the Stanley Cup Finals, they gave Canadians the special privilege of watching the entire game from start to finish. And in Game 1 of the 63 Stanley Cup Finals, Dick Duff of Toronto set an all-time Stanley Cup record by scoring 2 goals in the first 1 minute and 8 seconds of the series. So, and that was a record for one team. I believe it was still the standing record for fastest 2 goals in a playoff game by the same team until Calgary
until Calgary. There you go.
did it to the Oilers in game one. Remember, it was 2-0 before they even got to the 1 minute mark, and I think that was the one that broke Dick Duff's record after all these years. So.
Yeah, that was a disorienting game, that first game against the Flames. Just like the first game against the Avs was really
Yeah,
disorienting.
yeah.
Didn't get much better after that either with the Avs. Yeah, so Jay Woodcroft, Bruce, you did a
hmm
post on him.
Yes.
What would you say are the 2 or 3 or 4 things that Jay Woodcroft brought to the team that were lacking in the team? What changes did he make that you really liked?
Oh boy. Breath of fresh air, and at the same time, a breath of familiar air to the many players in that room who were familiar with Jay Woodcroft, either during his time as assistant coach, which was early in the careers of Connor McDavid, Darnell Nurse. Their rookie season was Woodcroft's first season as Todd McClellan's assistant. Draisaitl, that was his first full season. Even Nuge was a young developing player on that team, and so he has a little bit of relationship with those guys from before. And then, of course, 3.5 years down in Bakersfield, where he developed not only a relationship, but, uh, you know, a good understanding of the players that are now up and coming support players on the Oilers. So I think, his background, like, I think it's unique. I can't find another coach who uh, who coached in the big league team and the farm team, and then came back to the
Yeah,
big league club. I mean, guys like John Cooper, I mean, he has some of the Woodcroft resume in that he got called up during the lockout season 2013, and some of the Tampa guys. I think it was Andre Palat that got called up at the exact same time, and 2 or 3 guys that were on the farm team with him that year, and then were regulars on the Bolts with him after. Tyler Johnson was another, And, he had that advantage, but he didn't have the background of having already worked with, for example, Steven Stamkos and Victor Hedman would have been the equivalents uh, of had he been in that situation in Tampa. But so Woodcroft, like he really does have sort of two strong footprints within the organization that he's now standing on both feet as the head coach of the whole shebang, and he's got developed strong relationships and understanding with all of his all of his main players. Let's put it that way. And but also he brings a 21st century coaching perspective, or at least a 2020s coaching perspective, whereas the previous coaches the Oilers had were, in my view, their best years were behind them when they took the bench here. And I just like he's a strong communicator, and he's good in a public forum, and I'm very confident he's equally good in a one-on-one setting or in the dressing room or what have you. Like that's a real strength of his, and he's up on hockey theory. He's got the video coaching background. There's just a whole lot of sort of things in his resume coming up. He's 45 years old, and he has 13 years of coaching experience in the NHL, well, 13 and a half now. And he's now 4 years of being his own boss as a head coach. And, the future is bright.
He is very positive with the players. He never, so far at least, he hasn't thrown them under the bus in any way.
Not once.
He builds them up, and I think that's fairly effective with most human beings, to be in a positive environment like that. I liked, for whatever reason, and I don't know why, the team had fallen apart defensively under Tippett in the last few games. And they were just giving up grade A shots and 5-alarm shots galore, all kinds of 2-on-1s, 3-on-2 breaks. And, we hear about the coach losing the team. It looked like that had happened with the Edmonton Oilers. This team was just, whatever he was teaching them, they were not listening to. They weren't doing it. They weren't executing. And it was alarming. It was alarming enough that in the end, although Tippett had done well with the Oilers in his tenure, I thought it was a good move to make the change. And I had been resistant to that more than most Oilers fans right to the end. I hadn't seen the need for it, but I do think it was the right decision. Tippett, Woodcroft, the thing about his tactical decisions, almost all of them worked out. When he went, he would shift between going with 12 forwards and 11 forwards in games, and 6 and 7 defensemen, and usually that worked out well. I was skeptical of 11 and 7. Really worked with the Oilers, in large part because McDavid and Draisaitl then could get some extra ice time, and it also upset the flow of the other team's lines, and threw off that. You just never know who the Oilers are going to put on the ice, and I think that helped the Oilers and upset the opposition. He split up McDavid and Draisaitl and put Nugent Hopkins at center. And again, I had not been a fan of Ryan Nugent Hopkins at center for some time, but I thought Nuge played his best hockey of his NHL career at center as a two-way player. He's older now, and Draisaitl and McDavid were I've always liked them split up and always had favored that, and they played well. And then he went back to McDavid and Draisaitl at the right moment,
Yes.
in part due to injury, and that also worked. His pairings, his defense pairings, he put CC and Nurse together, which I had wanted to see, and he went with that pairing and stuck with it and gave them the hardest quality competition. That worked out, I think. It certainly worked out, I think, especially for the other pairings.
Yes.
In terms of Bouchard and Keith, and eventually Kulak and Barry, both those pairings excelled, or at least did a lot better. Kulak and Barry excelled, and Bouchard and Keith did a lot better when CC and Nurse started to take on all of the heavy lifting. I think it took a toll on Darnell Nurse's game. Cody CC rose to the occasion and generally got it done like he did all year. He benefited, Woodcroft did, from a few things. Kane was already with the team in Tippett's last games, but he really became a huge part of the team and got going in a big way. which was going to happen, whoever was the coach, I think. But Woodcroft benefited from that. And then the health of the goalies.
Yes.
He benefited hugely from Mike
Mm-hmm.
Smith getting healthy and getting on a hot streak. So there was some good luck there, but there is there is in all success an
Right.
element of good luck. And but there's also skill, good coaching, good moves, and Woodcroft did all of those things. The team in the playoffs, Bruce, the only thing that I really regret in this year's playoffs is that they weren't able to find that their top defensive game against the LA Kings earlier. If they had dispatched the LA Kings in 4 or 5 games in a 4 or 5 game series, which they should have, they were much better than the LA Kings, I think, in that series. I don't think it was that close, but the Oilers' defensive hockey was not strong enough in some of those games, especially I think games 3 and 4 or 4 and 5, four
Four
and
and
five,
five.
4 and 5. They brought their C game on defense, not their A game, and they paid a price. And the price you pay is you get beat up more if you have to play more playoff games, even
Mm-hmm.
if you're better than the other team. And it was a heavy, heavy, heavy price because that's when Leon Draisaitl got hurt.
Yeah.
As the series went along, I think it was a game 6 or was it game
Game
5?
6.
Game 6. So if they
Yeah.
had beaten out the Kings in game 5, that play doesn't happen. And maybe there's a different story when you eventually have to play Colorado. Maybe you could split up McDavid and Draisaitl. Maybe they find a way with Draisaitl healthy to beat Colorado. I think it was going to be a real challenge in any case. So so I don't think actually that is on part of defensive play is on the coach. Like he's telling the players what they have to do. The players themselves have got to realize it. They have to feel it in their heart and their bones and um, every part of their being. They've got to commit to defensive hockey. That didn't happen until they were on the ropes against LA. And maybe the Oilers needed that moment to fully understand how important fundamental defensive play was and that kind of defensive intensity was. So I'm not sure that's necessarily Woodcroft's fault. That's kind of a team learning moment. And I don't think they forgot that lesson throughout the playoffs, even though the Avs dominated them. I don't think it was because the Oilers didn't have defensive intensity. I think by then it was because the Oilers were beat up and facing a different beast than they had faced in Calgary or LA. Just the puck moving of the Avs is
Yeah.
out of this world good, and it's
Mm-hmm.
going to be a challenge for the Oilers to figure out
Mm-hmm.
how to beat that talent that the Avs present, especially on their blue line. And it might be Bruce playing pretty negative hockey against them in the future, like really clogging up the neutral zone. Like it might not be something that we're going to like necessarily
Mm-hmm.
as fans, but it's going
Right.
to be a defensive system and a defensive technique which will throttle those players eventually. And the Oilers are going to have to. That's Jay Woodcroft's next goal is to figure out that what players he needs, what he needs from the players he has in order to play the defensive hockey that it's going to take to beat the Colorado Avalanche. I think he's up to it. I think he's going to do that, and it might take a year or two, but I think he's going to do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a tall order now. Colorado themselves, they got. We're looking at the pinnacle of that team, I think, right now, in the sense that they have a whole lot of contracts that are coming up this summer, and they're not going to be able to keep all these guys. They have as unrestricted free agents Andrei Burakovsky, Nazem Kadri, Valerie Nichushkin, and on the back end, Josh Manson and Darcy Kemper in goal. That's 5 pretty important players for them. And, not even necessarily first line guys, but a lot of second line and high end second line players in that list. And they're not going to be able to keep them all. I mean, if they try and keep, say, Nichushkin, which there's talk of him being made now a priority on the fact that he's been playing fantastic. Uh, but they're not going to keep him at 2.5 million that he's got now. They're going to be keeping him at 5 or 6 million, and that's going to mean that they're not going to have a lot left to sign some of these other guys. So they're and then they got I think one more year of Nathan MacKinnon at 6.3, and then he's going to get a huge raise from that,
Yeah.
and they're going to have to pay for that somehow. So they've got they've got headaches, and I mean Joe Sakic has done an impressive job as GM. There's no two ways about it. Um, but he's got his work cut out for him.
Yeah, the heart of their team though, like those defensemen and McKinnon are back,
Yeah,
and they're
Rantanen
And
Landeskog.
Landeskog.
Yep.
So the heart of their team is back, and they will miss Kadri. Um, what we can hope is, like, we're all hoping that Jesse Puljujarvi becomes Edmonton's Valerie Nichushkin. Well, we can hope that Valerie Nichushkin becomes Colorado's Brian Bickle. Is that guy's name? That great big forward on the
Yeah.
Hawks who signed a big deal and then wasn't any good after that. So anyway, I'm not actually hoping that for that Valerie to fail like that, just a little bit. Um, they still have though Makar, and they've got Taves, and they've got Bowen Byram, right? To me, and
Yep.
McKinnon. This is the heart of their team.
And
Like
Rantanen.
those, and they got Gerard and Ranton, and they got Gerard coming back. They could trade Gerard. Like, he's got a pretty
I
big
think they
contract,
will. five
$5 million
million.
a year. I think they're going to find a taker for that contract
Yep.
because there's lots of teams that need. Is he right shot too?
He's a lefty,
Lefty that plays
and,
right.
and he's a little guy that when he got hurt, and I mean, once I knew that the Oilers would be playing them, and I was looking and saying, well, they're short a couple guys, and in Gerard's case, I was thinking, well, they're going to miss him, but at the same time, I thought he was one guy in their defense that might be vulnerable. That he's not that strong defensively, and I have very happy memories of Leon absolutely manhandling the guy in overtime on a shift in overtime that quickly ended the game in Edmonton's favor because Draisaitl so overpowered Gerard in the high in the zone and then again in the low slot. Attended that game in person. It was right in front of me, and I went, "Oh wow, Sam Gerard, you've got your hands full with big forwards in this league." And that was 3, 4 years ago, and no doubt he's got better, Gerard. But I see him as a trade chip for Colorado for cap
Yeah,
space first and foremost. And I mean, when they got him making 5 million, well now they got Bowen Byram. You know, when he got hurt, Gerard got hurt. Byram basically got promoted and got more ice time, and he's answered that bell. And so they may be looking at Byram as being sort of their number three guy going forward. And he's still on his ELC. He's got a year to run. So they're sitting pretty in that one as well.
yeah. So with Gerard, I think I think he's got like, I don't know, 5 years left at 5 million. So he's not cheap. He's not a
Yeah.
cheap player to
Yes.
get, but let me just see here. Yeah, his points per game was pretty good. He's right in
Mm-hmm.
he's right around where Tyson Barrie was in terms of even
And he
strength points per game this
doesn't
year.
play power play.
And he
Yeah.
doesn't
So
play power play. So you could see a team thinking, okay, there's lots of teams that would be improved by having Samuel Girard
yeah.
and have the cap space, like
Right.
Ottawa, or there's all these teams that could just take him and be a better team. So, maybe even Dallas, right? If they lose Klingberry,
Right.
John Klingberg, uh, to free agency, you could see
Mm-hmm.
them making a move for him. So yeah, Colorado's I think they're gonna figure it out. I'm hoping they can't keep Kadri, and they'll lose him because he's a pretty good hockey player, to say the least.
Yeah.
Okay, so any other thoughts on Woodcroft, or should we move on to the next topic?
Oh, just I liked his avail again today, and just his thoughts about moving forward in terms of using the summer to first of all reflect and go through his detailed game notes that he takes, and just sort of going back, starting with going back and reviewing what worked and what didn't work. And I suppose a lot of coaches probably have a similar mindset, but he does seem ultra organized. And the idea that he's going to be involved in the process right from the summer pro scouting meetings right through preparing for training camp and maybe even having some input on his players, what they're doing in the off season, and he'll come into camp with the job security, and and with some new pieces that he's going to have to mix in. But I think just the fact that he's going to be here all year and preparing for that grind is a real positive after having to sort of jump on the moving bus in the season just passed.
We're moving on to our next subject then,
Sure.
Bruce,
Yeah.
which is the MVP
Oh.
votes
Mm.
of the NHL. Both the players and the media voted on who was the most valuable player, and they both selected Austin Matthews. So, Bruce, I was ready to get. I actually thought that McDavid. I think there was a survey. They recently did a survey, the players, about who the best player is, and McDavid handily won this. Like, who'd you like to
Hmm.
most be on the ice with? It
Yeah.
was McDavid. It was when it wasn't close.
Yeah.
So I was thinking that the players actually might pick Connor McDavid as the MVP this year, as the best player this year, I should say. And they didn't. They picked Austin Matthews. Now we don't know how close the players' vote was. We do know how close the to their credit, the writers and broadcasters released the full results of who voted for what, and fantastic, good for them. They've started doing that a few years ago, and it's a very good idea. Matthews, I think, got about three votes for every, or three voting points for every two voting points that McDavid got. So it was close, but there was a number of writers who did not have broadcasters who did not have Connor McDavid in their top five, which is freaking
Five voters didn't have him in the top
preposterous,
five.
preposterous, right? That's
Yeah.
just ridiculous. That's asinine. So I was ready to blow my stack until I saw the players vote, Bruce, and I note that I think in the year that Taylor Hall, the narrative of Taylor Hall won the
Hmm.
Hart Trophy, rather,
Yep.
this idea that idiot Edmonton management made a mistake and traded their great player to New Jersey, and he transformed the New Jersey franchise by leading them to one playoff victory, I think, that year. They did make the playoffs. Taylor
Yes, they
Hall
did.
did have a good year, but
Hmm.
in no way was he better than Connor McDavid that year. And it was the narrative just took off, and Hall won the Hart Trophy. Uh, but he didn't win that year the Ted Lindsay Award for the NHLPA's best player. Connor McDavid won.
Right.
So I thought justice was done there, and I thought there might be a similar kind of justice this year. There
Hmm.
wasn't. Matthews won, so it really took the wind out of my sails in terms of complaining about this. Um, the players themselves on the ice, um, would they be affected by the huge media market of Toronto and the narrative about Matthews? Possibly. I mean, stranger things have happened, but no, I have to accept this result. I didn't,
Yep.
and I have to say, like, I actually can't say who the better player was this year in the regular season, McDavid or Matthews, because we didn't watch. I didn't watch Austin Matthews
But he was on
game in,
TV every
game out,
night, David.
shift in, shift out. Well, I don't watch all the games. I watch the Oilers. I'm very Oilers centric. Hell,
Mm.
even when I'm watching the Oilers play some other team, I'm really watching the Oilers. I mean, I don't focus that much on the other teams ever. Even when I'm watching the Oilers games, it seems enough for me to try to figure out what's going on with the Oilers rather than, I mean, for one person to have an understanding of the NHL, like the work that we put in on the Oilers, it's not
Yeah.
possible for one person to do that. Even if you're doing it full time, which, and this is just, part time for us. And so anyway, I can't say I understand Austin Matthews is a pretty good defensive hockey player, and his offensive numbers are really, really good. His 60 goal season can't be denied. So I just have to congratulate Austin Matthews on a great season and on the two award victories, even though I personally, based on my own bias, would have voted for Connor McDavid if I had a vote. If I had a vote, I would try to take it more seriously, though, and maybe, watch the other teams a little bit more.
Well, he won three trophies in all, of course, because he also won the Rock Richard for his
Yeah.
60 goal. Now, I find it a little bit peculiar that he, with his 60 goals and 106 points, convincingly won the Hart Trophy. And Leon Draisaitl, with his 55 goals and 110 points, very similar stats, finished ninth with zero first place votes uh, for the uh, Hart. Uh, but so it is. I mean, uh, let's put it this way: Austin Matthews is the first Toronto Maple Leaf in my lifetime to win the Hart Trophy. Last Leaf who did so was Ted Kennedy, Teeter Kennedy, In 1955, he won the Hart Trophy, and I was in the womb. So I guess some people might say that was in my lifetime, but I certainly don't remember it, other than I've read about the legendary Ted Kennedy. And Toronto, in all the years I've been tracking hockey till now, and 66 years since, won 0 Hart trophies. And my team, the Edmonton Oilers, didn't even get in the NHL for 24 years. Their first home game in the NHL was my 24th birthday. Before I turned 25, they already had a Hart Trophy winner. And now they have 12 different Hart Trophy seasons from 4 different players. And Toronto finally got one. So I'm not going to begrudge Leaf fans their moment of glory that they have the MVP in the league finally. It's been a long wait. And 67 years. That's a magic number in Toronto, 67. But anyway, they've got Austin Matthews. He's a great player. He had a great year, and move on to the next. I mean, our boys have already won. Connor's got 2 Hearts and 3 Lindsay awards. Draisaitl's got 1 each, and onwards to bigger or better things. A few people asked yesterday, would you rather have those 2 awards on the shelf, or would you rather have 2 playoff series wins? And I know what my answer is with a bullet. So I'm
Do we
quite
know who the
sanguine about it.
Do we know who the 5 writers are who didn't? Has anyone identified them?
The votes will be made public. It hasn't happened
They
yet,
are
but
they are public. I'm just looking at them right now. I
that
can't.
two left Matthews off their ballot. Like, he didn't get named on all the ballots. Whereas last year, McDavid not only won the MVP, he was unanimous, #1 on every ballot. So this year, even the winner didn't get named on all the ballots, let alone be the first name. So it's a little bit more of a less of a slam dunk. And that said, he won by a lot, like 500 points or something. So he's the clear winner of this year's poll.
Indeed, indeed. Oh well, whatever. Can't win them all. Bruce, and I do think there's a good chance. We just all watched the documentary, or many of us watched the documentary on Michael Jordan, and how he would take the smallest slight against him and build that up into this nuclear power pack generator of motivation inside of himself, and just absolutely be determined to crush that player. Like, there's more one-on-one competition in the NBA, of course. They play the whole game. It's a somewhat different, obviously it's a different 5-on-5 sport, but Jordan would use that as motivation to to propel him to new heights. I think Connor McDavid may have a similar personality, and this kind of thing may really fire him up in terms of getting him out there and working harder and training harder. I mean, he's obviously, when it comes to motivation, he's in the 99.99999 percentile already, but maybe this will add it. Just a little bit more fire to that ambition that he seems to have as a hockey player and a human being. So that's the good news, is he will not be satisfied, I do not think. Bruce, we're going to move on. Go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, second All-Star team. I mean, that's a big slate.
Ooh, that hurts.
No. Only made the second team.
One year, Phil Esposito won the Hart Trophy, I think, and finished on the second All-Star team, if I'm not mistaken.
Wayne Gretzky did that twice.
Ooh, that's not they're not liking that at all. So, all right, we're gonna move on to Jesse Puljujarvi. Keep, hold, or fold. I'm gonna be writing about him. I'm not sure if I'll write about him tonight or later on, but upcoming. You've already written a kind of a lengthy post in recent weeks on Puljujarvi. So, but I've yet to weigh in. Keep, hold, or fold, Bruce, on Jesse Puljujarvi.
Oh, I'm keep Jesse, man, all the way. I think he's scratching the surface of the player he's going to be, and I think he's already helping the team in important ways. and ways that are subtle and not fully credited by some in the hockey community. But his overall effect on the game is to tilt the ice uh, in the direction that favors the Oilers. Uh, uh, on largely his play, I won't say away from the puck, but I won't say with the puck. I'll say his play around the puck, uh, where he and not solely, but importantly in the offensive zone, where he is just so good at puck recoveries, at effective forechecks that prevent zone exits for the other team and create 50-50 pucks that either he or teammates will jump on to keep the pressure on. And we'll find out in our own scoring chance project, we see that there's plenty of goals that he contributes to that he's actually not credited with being part of the scoring play, but it's something that Jesse has done, be it to pop the puck free in the first place, or to create a screen in front of the net, or traffic that helps enable the goal to be scored. And those kind of skills, I don't think they're properly rated in the game, period. Like, he won't get paid for those kind of plays the way he was if he was piling up the goals and points. But to me, he had a good season, not a perfect season. It was compromised by health issues, and I think he actually got less effective in the late going of the season. But overall, a strong contributor to the success of his line, and no matter which line he was on, the same statement held true, that that line was better when he was on it.
Yeah, it's a real tough one. There's this what I call the Puljujarvi paradox, kind of seemingly contradictory things. Like, people will point out, you know, the Oilers, when he was on the ice, they scored more goals for percentage than any other player on the team, a higher percentage at even strength. Of course, then others people will say, well, he's on the ice with McDavid all the time. Do you actually put so much weight in that stat that you think, would you argue, because yes,
Yes.
Puljujarvi had a higher goals for percentage, that he's a better player than Connor McDavid? I don't think
No, I
that's
wouldn't argue that. I would argue
yeah.
that McDavid is better playing with Puljujarvi than without.
So yeah,
That's the
and
argument.
then they say, well, they don't score very much when Jesse's on the ice, which is also true. But of course, for sure, there's the least amount of defensive responsibility for a winger. So, it's much more important who the defenseman and the center were on the ice when he was on the ice in terms of goals against. The wingers have a huge contribution to the goals for, but on the goals against, that's really more comes down to the defensive play of the whole unit, with the biggest emphasis being on those defensemen, the center, and of course the goalie. So, but all of that said, if you actually track everything Puljujarvi does to help create grade A shots,
Hmm.
he rated very well on the team this year. He was one of the top wingers in the regular season. His game, though, did collapse in the playoffs. He was about half the player he was that he had been in the regular season. And that's a conundrum. It might be related to illness and injury. It's a highly likely explanation, but it did happen. And I think there's a lot of recency bias in terms of rating Puljujarvi because of that. Maybe, excuse me, even from Ken Holland and Jay Woodcroft to some extent. Holland's comment at the end of the year that they've got to sort out Yessa
Yeah,
was a little bit alarming, frankly.
it
It was
was.
not that positive. And so at this point, I'm kind of expecting the Oilers are going to trade Jesse Puljujarvi. Now, so in the keep, hold, or fold category, I think that my evaluation of him as a player, Bruce, is similar to yours. We may put different weight in different stats, but I think we come out in the same place, where I see this as a very, very promising player who had a really good year, who does make the players around him on the ice, who is a glue player, who is attacked for his hockey IQ consistently by NHL observers, I guess some scouts, and seeing the playoffs, you could see why, because he lost his confidence and he just started throwing the puck around the boards instead of trying to make plays. There was a real problem there with his play in the playoffs. But geez, overall, he goes to the net. That's a smart player who goes to the net, who's listening to the coach, go to the net. Good things happen. He was doing that all year long. We track something called hard plays on grade A shots. So these are the tips in front of the net, the jam plays in front of the net where like the goalie's got it and you're jamming there and defenseman's cross-checking you. These are like you charge hard at the net, opening up space for teammates to make passes, or you win a battle on the forecheck. You pop the puck or use your body to win the puck. So these are hard plays at the net on grade A shots. Well, Puljujarvi finished last year second only to Alex Chason on the team. Puljujarvi had last year, he had on grade A shots, he had 47 of those hard plays at the net in 55 games. This year, he had 81 of them in 65 games. So he greatly increased his rate of hard plays on the net on grade A shots this year. It's not an easy thing to do to make those plays. You take a lot of beating, take a lot of pounding, and he was willing to take it. And so there might be like this talk about his hockey IQ, but then I don't hear them say something. Well, but one thing we have to give him credit for, that guy, he goes for it. He's spending himself physically. He's a gritty hockey player who's I think a glue player. He does all these little things, these hard, dirty things in the game that make it easier for the players that he plays with. And in terms of defensive hockey IQ, I'm not seeing a lack of defensive acumen. Was he perfect on defense? No. Is any player? No. I mean, watch Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl for a season. You'll see them make dozens and dozens and dozens of mental mistakes on grade A shots against. Sometimes to an infuriating level personally with Leon Draisaitl, although you and I disagree about this somewhat. But I just think like there's not always a commitment there to making the fundamental defensive play. And that goes with every single Oilers hockey player. Puljujarvi's rate of defensive mistakes is average, I think, for a winger on the Oilers. There's some talk, who's better on defense, Yamamoto or Puljujarvi? The people who believe it's Puljujarvi will pull out the on ice numbers for goals against, and he's got better numbers than Yamamoto. Well, I think they're both actually pretty good. They both take care of their defensive responsibilities, and they both also lose their check now and then. They make mistakes. Yamamoto, when he was with Draisaitl and McDavid, he would often cover in the defensive slot. When he's with Draisaitl, who likes to cheat on defense, go for the steal and read the play, Yamamoto's always covering for him. So I just think they're both okay, at least defensive players. And I'm not seeing a lack of hockey IQ on either of those players. What I saw with Puljujarvi was a lack of confidence as the year went on, a lack of belief in himself that when he got the puck in the offensive end, he could make a play, and he was going to try to make a play. Instead, he was being passive and giving up the puck. So Ken Holland did identify that. Now, that could be an issue going forward. Like maybe he doesn't have high confidence, or maybe that's something that's going to be difficult to fix. But I think we've seen in the past players like Ryan McLeod, for instance, have games where you're starting to like stretches of games where you're starting to wonder, why is he in the NHL anymore? Because he's not making plays. And then I think these young players decide, I'm going to go for it no matter what and just see what I can do. And McLeod in the playoffs was sky high in terms of his confidence. Well, he could crash next regular season for 20 or 30 games. And that's what happened to Puljujarvi. It's not unusual for players' confidence and their willingness to try and to take chances for that to fade away, especially in a young player. But I think I think that the Oilers may move him. But so in terms of what category I'm in the hold category, not the keep category. And there's only one reason for that, and it's because of information that I don't have. I don't know necessarily how keen Jesse Puljujarvi himself is to stay in Edmonton. And I don't know how keen, what the contract demands of his agent are. Like, what are they looking for in terms of a contract? What do they think they should get? So if Puljujarvi does want to stay in Edmonton, and if the contract demand is reasonable, I'm definitely in the keep camp. But this is kind of an unknown right now. And there's been difficult negotiations in the past. And there's been indications, yes, he didn't always want to stay here. At one point, he went back to Finland and wanted a trade. So because of this, I really like the player. I hope he signs here. I think the Oilers would be wise to do what they can. And I wish Ken Holland had been more positive in terms of his verbal, saying he should have said, this is a player we'd like to keep.
Yeah.
He struggled in the playoffs, no
Mhm.
doubt about it. Struggled there. This is a guy, though, we see potential in. And that's what the definite message from Jay Woodcroft was. He said the players didn't ever lose confidence in Yessa, and neither did he as a coach. That was I think it was a mistake from Ken Holland, but Bruce, it could have also been like, if we're playing poker, it could have been a tell. And that's how I take that, as a tell that
Mhm.
Yessa Puljujarvi, and we don't know exactly why that is, like whether maybe Ken Holland's expecting a contract demand that's way too high,
Mhm.
and they just can't afford that. Maybe that's why he's pessimistic. Maybe that's it. We don't know. That might become clear, or it may never become clear. But I have the sense that he may be moved, and that won't be a happy day for me as an Oilers fan.
Yeah, well, and again, I mean, when Holland went to uh, Leto, his agent is, right, and
Yeah,
when he was in Finland and brought him back and got him to agree to a 2-year contract, which I think was a clear win for Holland to get him at under 1.2 million for 2 years. I think he way outperformed that contract in both years.
yeah.
Uh, but who knows what kind of agreement was reached? I mean, we know from before that Marcus Leto and negotiated in Puljujarvi's rookie year, when he originally agreed to come over here, that he would play at least 40 games and have his first season vest, because he played the 40th game and then got sent out right afterwards. It was a pretty obvious tell that it was just Peter Chiarelli living up to something he'd agreed to do. Well, who knows what Holland agreed to do? Maybe he said, sign for 2 years, and at the end of 2 years, you tell us if you want us to move you or keep you. I mean, you just don't know what kind of behind the scenes stuff might have gone on. That said, as a long suffering 21st century Oiler fan, uh, I am so sick and tired of seeing 24-year-old guys getting moved out of Edmonton when they haven't blossomed into full blown superstars. Well, there's something wrong with them. Let's get rid of that guy. Let's bring in, you know, some 30-year-old guy that's, been around the league 400 times, or uh, you know, let's go for the next shiny young kid or something. I mean, he's close to really emerging, and I think he has emerged to a significant degree. And to me, the team will be worse the day that they trade him. And maybe they trade him for some guy that hasn't quite got it done on some other team. Like, I see names like Casey Middlestat or maybe Martin Necas coming, as a guy. Like, if you trade him for a draft pick, well, you're waiting for that guy for 5 years. Uh, you got to get something back that's a little more current than that. But I think Jesse Puljujarvi is helping the Oilers right now, and he will continue to do so if they can come to agreement.
Maybe they'll trade him for Andreas Athanasiou.
Oh,
There's
stop.
my. I don't usually don't go for the cheap shot, but I couldn't resist that one. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
we have seen Bruce. Jarrett Stoll, Matt Green, Kyle Brodziak, Andrew Cogliano, Jeff Petrie, Justin Schultz. There has been a sorry number of trades of players who went on to other cities and became
Taylor
very,
Hall.
very, very, very good hockey players. Yeah, Taylor Hall. It's a kind of a different
Mm-hmm.
category, and I like Adam Larson a lot.
But
So
yeah, but I'm talking about just guys that, they start here, they play here for a few years, and then they get to their mid 20s, and all of a sudden they're ready to be moved on out of here.
Jordan Eberle,
And
Ryan
they,
Strome.
yeah, 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 guys that they didn't get full value for uh, on their way out, or they didn't get any value for in some cases. I mean, I've written more than a couple pieces on this over the past of building your team from within, and you need not just your star players, but some of your role and support players uh, that are coming up and through the organization. And he's still in the value contract stage of his career, because he's got 2 more RFA years, and he's up for UFA in 2024, not 2025, as reported in some places, because of that thing I mentioned earlier with the 40 games in 2016-17. But in 2 more years, he's up for unrestricted. But they have, 2 RFA years. And, in the perfect world, to me, they'd sign him while his box cars are down and get him under lock and key for 3 or 4 years. But I don't see that at this point. I think it's 1 year, 2 years tops.
Yeah, I'm hoping they move out Zach Cassian, Warren Fogle, and Tyson Berry.
Pay those
And
contracts to him and Yamamoto, and it's all good.
yeah, and with Berry using that money to get a goalie.
Mm-hmm.
So
Exactly.
yeah, I'd like to see that happen. This happen with the Edmonton Oilers. I mean, or you could I guess blow all the money on Evander Kane if that's one of the decisions that could be made. But the Oilers have enough young wingers that I think if they can move Fogel's contract and if they can move, especially if they can move Cassian's contract, that'd be fantastic. But we'll see what happens there. It's not. I don't think it's necessarily impossible. It's probably unlikely you could move Cassian's contract without a sweetener. But there might be some team, desperate for a bigger, tough player that will go for him. With the Oilers retaining some of the salary.
Right.
That's a possibility. I mean, we've heard that in the past that some team might be interested in him. So
Even if they retain some, at least they only would have to retain for 2 years. Or if they go for the buyout route, that is a 4-year commitment that they keep paying, after the contract's expired. And I mean, we know looking at the Oilers' payroll year after year, they have, like $5 million in dead cap space because of mistakes they've made in the past on some of these long-term contracts. And Cassian, I think, was a little bit unforced error, but
indeed. Alrighty. Any other news? I think that's about it for now. We're going to keep doing our keep, hold, and fold series, right?
yeah.
Do you know who you're writing about next? Have you figured it out, or?
Well, if you're writing about JP, I might follow right up with KY, Kyler Yamamoto, because they're kind of almost peas in a pod, both first round draft choices, both 98 birthdays, both with identical cap hit on expired RFA contracts, and they play the same position even. So there's, lots of compare and contrast. And uh, some are saying, well, which one would you keep? And my answer is, well, both. All things being equal, I'd rather keep those young guys and keep building with them. We saw Yamamoto take a big step this year, and I don't think he's done growing, and I don't think either one of them is. So, but
Here's one for you, Bruce.
mhm,
Ethan Bear is apparently on the trading block, can talk
mhm.
to other teams. Would you be interested, under what circumstances would you be interested in bringing him back to Edmonton, if any?
That's a difficult question. Uh, I mean, I like the player, and I've liked him since the Oilers drafted him, and I had the chance to interview him as an 18-year-old with Seattle, and actually that may be the magic word. I think there may be a best fit for him in Seattle
Yeah,
as a place for a landing spot for him, where he has a personal history, where he's got a team with lots of room to grow and so on. In Edmonton would depend on the status of their other right, specifically right defenseman. CC is locked down. Bouchard, I think, is basically locked down long term. Barry's got 2 more. Like right now, there's no room for a right defenseman. And if they move
yeah,
Barry and brought in Bear, I mean, maybe you're saving some money by doing that. But I don't think that's probably the mix that they're looking for. So I think it's highly doubtful. And
yeah,
also, he
yeah.
went through some crap during his time here, which might make him reluctant to return. So more is a pity. Even though I will say that a huge majority of the fan base went to bat for the guy, but
Oh,
it
yeah, he was
was
a real fan favorite. Yeah, he
mhm.
was a huge fan
So
favorite. So, yeah, I don't know. Here's my thing about Ethan Bear. He is a good player. He's not as good as Cody Ceci or Evan Bouchard, and I don't think he's actually that close.
right,
And especially against tough competition. He as a third pairing demon at the right price, that
yeah,
I could, that's something to think about. That said, you have Philip Broberry, and I would rather Philip Broberry play the right side He's bigger, he's faster, and I think to beat the Avs, the Oilers are building a team to beat the Avs and I think that down the road, you're much more likely to beat the Avalanche by developing Philip Broberry as opposed to Ethan Bear and using that ice time in that way. So that would be my strong preference, even though I think Ethan Bear is a good third pairing NHL D man, and can play in the top four on some teams. He's not the right fit in Edmonton. And then there's just all of the pressure about him being First Nations Indigenous player, which is so greatly magnified in Edmonton, both in a positive way and a negative way, but in a way that kind of, I think, becomes too much for the human being, for the individual himself to deal with. Just the constant discussion about it, the constant focus on it. It's got to be a distraction, and I think it was for Ethan Bear on a number of different levels. The negativity, but just the scrutiny as well that comes out of that. So I think it sounded to me like he was really relieved to be in Carolina, and that I suspect that he wouldn't want to come back to Edmonton, and would prefer to play in somewhere where the spotlight on him isn't so great. And I think that probably makes a lot of sense.
They're different. Like I say, Seattle, I think that's a nice fit because he's got a history playing hockey right in that city, and so and playing it well, his team went to the Memorial Cup and he won the WHL's Best Defenseman award. Like he's got a good positive history there, and now an NHL history, and coming back to a team that's trying to establish himself. I could see them really wanting to go for that player and being a good fit for both player and team. So that's just an educated guess on my part, but something to watch for.
Yeah, good guess. All right, Bruce, let's leave it there. Thanks for talking today.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.